Well, good evening, everybody. My name's Corey, and just an incredible evening where we get to celebrate our graduating students and our seniors that are moving on. And we just tuned our speakers, so that's where all that low end came from this past week. So sorry about that. That was a very loud video. But we're in the final week of Underrated, and it's just so fitting that it's Grad Sunday as we dive into this last topic together of how are we mentoring, how are we leading the next generation, how are we setting people up for what's next in their lives. And what Casey said is so true in 2 Timothy, where Paul's talking and saying the Spirit doesn't give us a life of being timid, but instead gives us power and love and self-discipline. And that's not just for grads in the room. That's for everybody. That's for anybody in transition, anybody that's stepping out into something new, anybody leading anywhere in your businesses, at school, mentoring, anything like that. For anybody feeling underrated or overwhelmed, that passage is for you. You don't get a spirit of being timid. You get a spirit of power and love and of discipline. And the best sermon illustration for this topic is just this group and their leaders. I mean, it's incredible to look at the journey you guys have been on together and the way your small group leaders have poured into you so personally. And they answered 5 questions that we've been talking about every week of this sermon series that are going to pop up on the screen behind me. And the idea is if you can answer these 5 questions, if you can look somebody in the eye and answer these questions, it all of a sudden becomes personal. It gets real. And you start doing life together, and you start journeying together, and it's more than just showing up on a Sunday, but it's every day we do life together. And I've gotten to see that happen between the small group leaders and students of this graduating class. And it's just incredible to see the life change happen. There are so many leaders that are in this class. They're the top of their classes in their schools. They are strong. They support each other through thick and through thin. I could tell you story after story of where that has been true for these students, where they look each other in the eye and they go, hey, I know you're struggling and I'm here because we're family. And that's what we do together because we have a power of love and self-discipline and strength. I mean, that's incredible to see that happen. So I want to ask us the question that Casey ended with last week of, who did you have coffee with this week? She said, go find somebody to have coffee with. Go find somebody to pour into, to figure out the answer to maybe these 5 questions for somebody in your life. So who did you have coffee with? Because the reality of our church is we're not a sit down and feel good church. We're a church of let's get up and do something. And so I want to ask you, who did you have coffee with this week? And if your answer is, well, I haven't gotten around to it, I haven't had a chance to actually go and sit down with somebody, let's do it. Let's do that together because here's the thing. Older people, as I've been talking with people about this sermon series and the topics that we've been talking about, older people want to be mentors and want to have influence in the next generation, but often older people feel left out. They feel invisible. They feel like nobody wants them anymore, pushed aside by younger generations. But then here's the other thing. Younger people want mentors. I don't know about you, but I can speak for me personally. I want somebody that's a few steps down the road than I am to journey with me, that they've learned some things about life, that we can do this thing together. I want somebody to journey with and to be a mentor in my life, but often the younger generation feels ignored or like it's not our time yet or everybody else is just too busy. And so what I think is interesting about that, though, is we both want this mentoring kind of thing. We both want to journey with somebody. For faith, for our lives, for relationships. We want somebody to journey with us through our jobs. We want somebody to be with us, but when we feel underrated, when we feel underestimated, we begin to overcompensate. We act like we don't need it. We act like, oh, I've got it all figured out. I've got it all together. I'm going to fake it till I make it. But deep down, we have that hunger for somebody to journey with us. And looking at this senior class, you guys have something special because you guys have somebody to journey with you. No matter where you go in the world, you can pick up the phone, call somebody in that small group, and they're with you. Your small group leaders are with you. Small group leaders, maybe you thought that when they graduate, like you're done in ministry with them, but you're not. Sorry. So maybe you signed up for 7 years, but it's like signing up for life. And that's what we're talking about because everybody wants somebody to journey with them. And so I love this for our seniors, but I ask myself the question of, well, I wonder how many students in our schools, how many kids in our neighborhoods don't have this? How many people in your workplace don't have this? The younger associates, the interns, the people that you may lead. Maybe it's you. Maybe you don't have this kind of relationship of somebody to journey with you. But I wonder, what would it be like if everybody had somebody a little bit older and a little bit younger that they were journeying with through life? I think it would change communities. I think the stereotypes might begin to shift for students if every student had somebody that was journeying with them. I think people would rise to the challenge of somebody looking at somebody else in the eye and going, you've got potential. I see incredible things in you. Like, come along, I'm going to journey with you. People will rise to the challenge. But I know it's true about you because this is true about me. We settle. When life gets hard or when this mentor thing or this journey gets difficult, we start to sit back and we settle. We go, well, nobody would want to journey with me. Like, I don't even have my own life together. How can I journey with somebody else? Or we say, well, nobody sees me. I'm kind of feeling underrated. I'm kind of feeling passed by, so I'm just going to settle. But that's not that verse from 2 Timothy of not being timid, but having power and love and discipline. That's not that. But what this small group has, what these graduating seniors have experienced is that power and that love of not settling, of doing the journey together. And that's what we can do in our circles as well. So I want to look at Timothy, who's been our character for this sermon series for the past few weeks. Paul and Timothy have a very unique relationship, and I want to look at how that began for them. And so we're going to look at the book of Acts in the Bible, and Acts really gives us the start of the church. And we see the very first Jesus movement and how that started, and Paul and Timothy play a really important role in that. And so Acts chapter 16, verses 1 through 3 explains how that started. And it says, Paul came to Derbe and then to Lystra, where a disciple named Timothy lived, whose mother was Jewish and a believer, but whose father was a Greek. The believers in Lystra and Iconium spoke well of him, so Paul wanted to take him along on the journey. And when they journeyed, they did a lot of things together, and they had an impact. And if you skip ahead to verse 5, it says, so the churches were strengthened in the faith and grew daily in numbers. It wasn't about butts and seats for them. It wasn't about growing their numbers at church. It was about being strengthened in their faith and growing daily together. And so that was the impact that Paul and Timothy had. Paul took Timothy on a journey, not to get coffee, not to go to a meeting, not a job, but Paul took Timothy on a journey, one where you may never actually arrive anywhere. You may never actually get to the finish line and go, the journey's over right here, because you take the next step. And you say, well, we're on the journey forever together, because the point is the journey. The point is being together and doing life together. And small group leaders, you probably remember the moment where you met your student for the first time, or your students. You probably could look each person in their eyes and say, I remember when we met. I remember the moment that I realized something special was going to happen. Students, you probably realized when these adults cared about you, more than just being adults in the room, but they cared that you mattered. You probably remember the moment where something clicked and you went, oh, these adults like sign up to be here, and they care, and they want me to be here. I have a place, and the same goes for all of us here too. You probably remember the moment when somebody influential stepped into your life and started journeying with you. You probably remember who they are and how that started and the journey process together. And I know I remember that. And Paul says to Timothy, Paul goes, I see you. Let's do life together. I'm with you. You belong. And it's not just the story of Paul and Timothy. This is the story of our faith. This is the story of so many characters in the Bible. It's the story that was written down in this book that we call the Bible, but it's the story of our faith. And we see it with Jesus in the disciples. It's not about Jesus being the leader. It's about Jesus getting on his knees and washing his disciples' feet. We see it in Paul and Timothy. We see it in Jethro rising up Moses, who rose up Joshua. And then we see it each and every day with our small group leaders and their students. And then we see it in our incredible students who are pouring into the next generation of middle schoolers and elementary schoolers and stepping down into kids ministry. I mean, it's the story of our faith. And through the story with Paul, we see that Paul is incredibly thankful. Paul knew he had a shady past. Paul was not who anybody would really think would be leading. But Paul's thankful, even though he had a shady past. Paul remembers the mercies of God. Paul steps in to feel the overwhelming gift of grace. And from that position, he begins to journey with Timothy. And so I wonder for us tonight, if we change the details a little bit, if that could be our story too. That we're thankful. We know our past. I know my past, and I know, gosh, there's no way that I'm qualified to lead people and to journey with people. There's no way. But we can be thankful for the God that we get to journey with. We know the gift of mercy that God gives us. We can embrace that gift of mercy just like Paul embraced that gift. We can feel overwhelmed by the grace of God in our own lives, that it starts to overflow into other people's lives. You might be going, I'm the worst, I'm unexperienced, I'm too young, I'm too old, but I am so thankful for God. I'm so thankful to know the mercy and the grace, and I'm going to lead from that. I'm going to be thankful, and I'm going to experience that from the people ahead of me, and I'm going to share that to the people that follow me. And we feel this tension, especially in transitional moments in our lives. Students, as you're getting ready to go to college or the next step for you in your career, we feel this tension of going, I don't know, I feel like I'm too whatever. I feel overwhelmed. But remember who you are. Lean in those moments. Remember the people that are journeying with you still. That it's not the end of the journey, it's the beginning of the next chapter of the journey. And as part of confirmation class, our students watched the movie Lion King, and on Friday night at our youth banquet, somebody mentioned being a Nala for somebody else. You have Nala and Simba in the movie Lion King, and it's just a beautiful image of who are you doing life with? Simba goes off, gets a little crazy, gets hooked up in the wrong crowd. They weren't bad guys, they just got off, but who are you journeying with? He was journeying with those people in the forest, but Nala comes and says, hey, what are you doing, Simba? Nala brings him back and journeys with him. She doesn't leave. The journey's not over when he gets back home. And so the same is true for you and for me and for everybody in the room. Who are you inviting on the journey with you? Who are you inviting to do life with you? And we might make mistakes along the way. We might take a left turn or a right turn and go down a different path at some point. We might make a few mistakes, but somebody's journeying with you. Somebody in your life is going to be the Nala in the Simba and Nala scenario and come after you and say, hey, remember who you are. Rafiki in the movie looks at Simba in the face and he goes, remember who you are. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie. Because how often do we forget who we are? We get overwhelmed. We feel underrated. We feel like people are pushing us aside. We all want somebody to journey with us, and we can remember that people are with us. So I want to challenge us tonight. Everybody in this room has ownership and leadership and has the potential to give their time to somebody younger, so do that. Give ownership and leadership in your time to somebody younger because it makes a difference. Journey with them. And then if you're somebody younger, if you're receiving that, claim that ownership, claim that leadership, claim that time, and run with it to do incredible things in the world. This is not just a graduation thing. This is an everybody thing. When somebody's pouring into you, claim that leadership and that journey and run with it because we need what you bring to the world. Students, your colleges need what you bring to the college. Our community needs what each and every person in this room brings to the table. So claim that and run with it and do something incredible with it. I want to ask you, who did you have coffee with? That's just the start. Because the real question is, who are you inviting on the journey with you in life? Find someone to journey with you who's been down the road, and find somebody that you can journey with where they can lead you to where they've been and where you can lead them to where you've been. Because that gives us hope for our community together. That gives us hope for you and me in the journey, for something greater than you and I could ever imagine. When somebody can look at you and say, I see something great in you, let's journey together. Amazing things happen when God is in the middle of that relationship. Let me pray for us. God, thank you so much that you set us up to do life together, to journey together, to be in relationships together, to lead together. And thank you for putting people in our lives that are just a few steps ahead of us and a few steps behind us that we get to lead with and that we get to show the road of life to. God, when we misstep, when we make mistakes, help us to have people that guide us. Help us to never forget who we are, and help us to never forget these people that are with us each and every step of the way. Be with us and keep us. We love you. Thank you for loving us. Amen.